Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, ClownsInCyberspace. I have accumulated a thriving population of clowns in my pursuit of costuming, and, while making such a large cast of characters, there are bound to be some blunders along the way. One such blunder is Panto, the little mime clown. Panto was created head to toe while I was spending a prolonged period of time in Berlin. And, as you might guess, I did not have my full repertoire of clown constructing materials there with me. So, not all aspects of the costume turned out how I would have liked them to. On a side note, I had plans to make a full video on the costume making process for Panto. However, all the footage was taken on an iPhone, which led to the footage being of very poor quality. A quality so poor I was too ashamed to post it at all. But, if you're curious to see what that looked like, here it is. Now, before we begin, we need to answer a very important question. Who is Panto? Panto is a typical Pierrot clown, a simple clown of black and white. Panto is also a sort of self-insert character for the comic series Mime Tales. The series chronicles the misadventures of Panto and friends as they grapple with things like art, psychology, and interpersonal relationships. Mime Tales is a comic series I started while I was away in Berlin, and it was a way for me to reconnect myself with my art practice while I didn't feel like I had full access to it at the time. If you're interested in keeping up with this comic series, you can find it on my Instagram page under a highlight reel. So, what is the issue with Panto? I actually quite like this costume. However, the unavoidable flaw is Panto's face. The construction of the mask was a bit haphazard and came out looking lumpy and awkward in my opinion. Not only that, but the mask was actually damaged while it was being transported home. So, I think Panto deserves a bit of justice. And so, follow along with me while I bring Panto into a new glory with a facelift. The mask making process begins with constructing a base layer using plaster strips. I have a replica of my head to help with this process. If you're doing this at home, you could try layering the plaster strips on your own face after you've protected your skin with a layer of Vaseline, or you could try layering the plaster strips on a styrofoam wig head as well. Since this is an activity that I do quite often, I found it worthwhile to just make a plaster replica of my head. Once you're finished layering all the plaster, I find it helpful to fortify the perimeter of the mask with more plaster strips. This will keep the edges of the mask from crumbling away and fraying. And then I left the mask on my balcony so that it could dry more quickly. Once the mask is completely dry, it's time to start sculpting the details using polymer clay. This part of the process tends to be the most expensive. I personally use the Sculpey brand of polymer clay, which I find the easiest to sculpt with. Unlike other cheaper options of clay, Sculpey holds its shape very well and stays pretty firm while you're handling it. Since Panto is a character with a very simple design, it was important for me that the mask was just right because it will end up being the focal point of the costume. This means making sure that the face is smooth and free of lumps, and trying to make the features as symmetrical as possible. Once I'm happy with the way the mask looks, I bake it in the oven for around an hour. This will help make sure that the mask is completely hard all the way through. I've been asked in the past if it's safe to bake the plaster in the oven along with the clay, and I can't guarantee your safety while doing this, but I've never had an issue and I do it quite often, so I think it's safe. After the mask is baked and has had time to cool off, I will spend time sanding it. For some reason, the flaws and blemishes in the sculpting only become obvious to me once I have made them irreversible. Oh well, nothing a little sanding can't fix. Now that the bare bones of the mask are all done, I can begin my favorite part, which is painting the mask. First, the mask gets a few layers of gesso. I start with gesso before adding the eyelashes because I also sand the layer of gesso to smooth out the brush strokes, and if the eyelashes are there, they'll get in the way. For the makeup, I'll be using a combination of chalk pastels and acrylic paint. I build up layers of pastels in the cheeks and the lips to give them color, and I seal each layer with a spray sealant until the pigment has built up enough for it to be quite opaque. I normally leave the lips with the color that the pastels have given them, but for Panto I'm painting them a bright red to give the face a more graphic look. The eyebrows and eyeliner are also done in acrylic paint. Also, to emulate how the character looks in the comic strips, I'll be adding some eyelid details and some lower eyelashes. For the eyelashes, I make them out of epoxy sculpt. I've made them out of polymer clay in the past, but I would strongly recommend using epoxy clay instead, because once it cures it's a lot stronger than polymer clay, and trust me, the eyelashes will break off. Panto is also one of the few clowns that have visible hair. Usually the clown hair comes in the form of yarn or satin fringe, but Panto's hair is sculpted on so that it keeps its shape. Now that the mask is done and I can compare it to Panto's old face, I'm so glad I chose to give this poor clown a makeover. And I also hope that watching this process was insightful for you in some way. I've been working on other ways to make clown masks that are less time consuming and messy, and also, most importantly, yield a more consistent quality. But for now, this way works wonders. And now, let me introduce you to Panto, the little mime clown. Well, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video and for choosing to follow along with my clown adventures in cyberspace. I hope you have a life filled with joy and wonder forever. Goodbye.